Sean and Mike Westhoff had so much faith in me as a football player that they would, first of all, they were very vocal about that. They downplayed how unique this was to me in every setting. Sean and Mike were both like, you're gonna be fine, like you're just gonna go do this, you'll be fine. And it was really, really empowering.
Just that belief they had in you.
The belief they had in me, and they were verbal about that. But the biggest thing is it then led to opportunities, right? They created opportunities for me. And then I was like, okay, they've told me they believe in me, but now they're showing me, like they are giving me more and more and more opportunities. And that has been a really, really powerful lesson for me in terms of leadership. They empowered me.
In this episode, I have the remarkable opportunity to sit down with Taysom Hill. Yes, that Taysom Hill, the famous BYU quarterback, jumping over Texas players, now is in the NFL playing for the New Orleans Saints. And, this experience of him through a career in professional sports, I thought would have a lot of parallels with church leadership, because sporting is such a remarkable laboratory of leadership and mentorship. And so I sit down with Taysom, talking about his faith development, the impact of his mission that it had on his life, and how it impacts him even today in the NFL. And then different coaches he's had. What leadership concepts has he learned in different locker rooms with different coaches? And there are some phenomenal parallels that any church leader can benefit from. And he's been working with the youth in his ward, and how to connect with youth. We talk about that, and just some great insights. It's fun to sit down with somebody who's had such a unique career and journey, and has a strong faith in the Lord Jesus Christ. So here's my interview with Taysom Hill. Today, I'm excited to welcome in Taysom Hill. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is cool. We typically interview like old, boring, like established leaders, who have gray hair, who've been bishop 4 times or whatever. But it's cool to bring someone in maybe who's experienced leadership and cultural dynamics in a different arena like football. So This is cool.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It's cool. Now, you're from Pocatello, Idaho.
Yep.
And was there a moment where you thought, okay, this football thing, like I've got a knack for it? Like, was it in high school? Did you always play, or what was that like?
Yeah, I mean, I always played. I would say there was always like, maybe like a little stigma growing up in Pocatello, Idaho. It's, a small town that there was this thing about like, oh, how good is the competition, right? And you would go to camps and stuff. And I always felt like there was something there. And so I felt like that was always in the back of my mind, right? I knew I was a good player, and and whatever, but it was really hard to know if I was going to have opportunities, at the next level. I will say I had 3 older siblings that all played college sports, and having seen them go to high school, be successful, and then go to college and be successful, that was that kind of flipped the switch for me.
Yeah,
I knew it was possible, and I knew I could do it because I'd seen those guys do it.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think that there were moments, even when I got to BYU, you're kind of like, oh my gosh, now like the pool that you're now competing against is, this nationwide pool where you're playing against the best talent in the country. How am I going to stack up?
Yeah.
And then you go to the next level and you have those same thoughts and those same feelings. And, people always talk about, you need to have a moment, where that you belong. And at every stage, I remember having those moments.
Yeah. Like you can hang here, like you're going to do all right.
Yeah.
Nice. Tell me just about your faith development as a child in your home, or what was that like? Pretty traditional upbringing, or?
Yeah, I would say very traditional upbringing. My parents were both raised in the church and married in the temple. Like that was really everything. As I look at my life and as I have conversations, people ask me, what role is religion? Like they know I've served a mission, they know I've done stuff like that, and it's kind of like, well, it is everything, right? It's intertwined into everything that I do. And I would say that was a house that I grew up in, So I grew up we weren't always the most consistent in terms of FHE and family scripture study.
Oh, so you're normal.
Like
okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So very, very normal, very traditional. But man, as I look at the foundation that my parents set for me, and now as a parent and husband, they gave me like a great playbook, right, to raise my own kids.
Yeah. So was a mission always just a no-brainer for you?
Yeah, it was a no-brainer. I had this, I say naive. I had this like naive mindset when I was a kid that I was going to go serve a mission to give back. I will say I recognized that athletically that I had been given a lot. And my mind, I was going to go serve a mission to give back. And I always attributed my success on the football field and in other areas to God. Like I felt like those were blessings from God. And as a 12-year-old and then 15 and 16, 17, I felt like I was going to go give back by serving a mission, and I would hear people talk about this idea of a tithe, right? You're going to go give 2 years to God. And that kind of resonated with me a little bit, and I was like all for it. So yes, as I was being recruited, the first thing was I'm gonna serve a mission. So tell me how that affects this conversation. And then obviously, you go serve and you realize that, that I again become the greatest benefactor of what I was doing, you know? And so I say this naive mindset because at the end of the day, the life that was changed the most, in my opinion, was my own.
Nice. And you went to Australia, right?
Yep.
Was that, did you want to go for it? I mean, what do you remember those leading up to serving a mission?
I mean, if you would have asked me like if I could hand pick a mission, I would have said Sydney, Australia.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
nice.
Yeah. I wanted to go foreign, but I wanted to speak English. I wanted to be able to like allocate 2 years to studying the gospel, learning the scriptures, and I didn't, want to have to allocate so much time and energy to learning the language. So that was a home run for me. My oldest brother actually served in the same mission.
Oh, wow.
So I tell people I had Christmas dinner in the same house he did just 10 years later.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That is awesome.
So, we had some incredible experiences, that way, where he was a first missionary that taught a man. He was a young man at the time that ended up getting baptized. When I was there, he was now serving as bishop.
Oh, wow.
So
cool.
we had some great experiences, but yeah, I would have handpicked that mission for me.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So just like reflecting on your mission, like from a personal development, a leadership development, I mean, I'm sure there's components you learned in the mission context that you've taken into football. Like what comes to mind, or if there's stories or things that really stand out about that experience?
Golly, I mean, the mission was everything. It's hard to verbalize what the mission did for me in terms of putting my life on the trajectory that it is. It gave me a routine-based life, I would say. You become so routine-oriented as a missionary. You wake up at 6:30, you work out from 7, and then you're studying at 8, and then you're out the door, and you do that for 2 years, and you realize the power of having a routine, and sticking to that routine and what you can accomplish as a result of that. And I look at what I do now, and I mean, if you were talking to my wife and you asked her what would Taysom be doing on a Wednesday at this time, she would tell you exactly what I would be doing, because when I get to the season, I have such a specific routine that gets me ready for a game on Sunday.
Yeah.
And so as I look at the mission, I think that's probably one of the biggest things that has stayed with me, that has created a pattern of success in my life, in all facets, So even in the off season, I have a pretty strict and structured routine that I follow. So I think that's the biggest thing. I think the mission fields, I developed a love for the scriptures. I developed a love of, knowledge and understanding things, and understanding the role of the Holy Ghost and how that affects you in your life and decision making, and both temporal and spiritual. So it's a hard thing to put into words of what my mission meant to me, because there's not a day that goes by that the principles that I learned as a missionary don't affect what I'm doing.
Yeah. That's powerful. Anything else worth mentioning during those mission years? I mean, of course we could do a whole podcast on it, but
yeah.
As far as your personal development, or does that kind of sum it up?
I don't know. I think, look, as a 17-year-old boy, I would say I had a testimony of the gospel, but then as I look at, where I am now, or, what I gained as a missionary, I realized, man, I don't want to say so far behind, right? But I grew so much over those 2 years that I felt like I really got to know the Savior, and that has been the most meaningful thing to me from the mission, that I'll just, never, I'll never lose that, and that created this foundation for me as I went to school, set an expectation and a foundation of, me dating, finding a wife, and now like raising kids. It all stems back from there.
Highly recommended, it sounds like.
Yeah. No, and I get asked that question a lot, right? There's a lot of young athletes that are being recruited, and man, what do you think? Is a mission worth it? Like, I don't know if I'll be the same player when I get back. Like, do you think I could go play sport, and I could be a great ambassador through sports,
right?
And I don't think, I think everyone has different paths. And so there's not just some cookie cutter path for everybody. I know for me that I'm a much better athlete having served a mission. I'm for sure a much better person. I'm a much better husband. I'm a much better father having served a mission. So when you look at all of that, I always tell kids, like, you will never regret serving this in any capacity.
Yeah, even what you mentioned about just the concept of routines, like learning these nuanced habits or principles that are helping you in that world that sure, maybe you would have developed that, but again, it's just another place to really develop as an individual, so you can face these other challenges in your career, right?
For sure.
Yeah. And because there is that pressure, and I would imagine even since you were in Little League or high school, like from a church leader standpoint, you sometimes hear like, oh, youth in a ward, like, oh, they can't come to the youth activity because they've got like this tournament, they're going out of town. Like, it seems like sports is such this heavy thing on a family, and maybe someone in the family is starting to get accolades, they're really starting to develop, and it's like, hey, this, we got to make sure we invest in this, because this could be a really big blessing for our family. And so it becomes consuming, right? Have you seen that? I mean, what would you tell to like families who are trying to navigate this sports world now?
It's a great question. And again, I think every family is different. Every kid is different, and my wife and I have this conversation a lot, right? Where, I just think and you would know this better than I do. I got 2 kids. I got a 1-year-old. I got a 4-year-old. So I haven't really seen all this. I've seen bits, but every kid is different, So I think every kid has different needs. And so, what I'm going to say may not apply to everybody, but I look at youth programs and in the church, and maybe this would be a good question for you, right? You've had more leadership experience than I have in the church. I've served, most of my callings have been with the youth in the church. But I guess the question that I would have is, what are we trying to accomplish in these youth programs? So, and that's like, what are we trying to accomplish as a bishop? What are you trying to to get these young kids to learn?
Yeah. And this is I think that's a phenomenal like starting point question, because oftentimes we don't think about that. It's like, no, we just do the Wednesday thing, and we got FSY coming up and we do that and the trek or whatever.
Yeah.
But to really sit back as a leader and say, what are we trying to do? And how can it be as valuable to a family than the sports camp? Or because that does a lot of personal development too, right?
Sure.
It teaches hard work, it does all these things. So I think whether there's a perfect answer for that, I think that's a phenomenal question for all leaders to step back and say, all right, what are we really doing here? What do we want to accomplish? Right.
Well, yeah. So this is, I guess this is my thought process is, if I got a kid that's going to a youth program in the church, I'm hoping that they're learning leadership, skills. I'm hoping they're learning social skills. I'm hoping they're like learning to interact with their peers, right, in a healthy way. And I'm hoping that they're going to youth programs to learn from an adult who's had different experiences, right, that they can help them learn all these different attributes, right, and ultimately become closer to the Savior. And I think it's important that there's a combination, right, of, hey, we're going to go play basketball this Wednesday, we're going to go swim or whatever that is, but then the next Sunday is, hey, we're going to sit down and have a Bishop Youth Fireside, or whatever that is. And I think that through sports, right? Like sports have really been my life, right? I have learned a lot of those attributes through playing sports, so I think there needs to be a healthy balance. If I have a kid that is like doing well in school and he's really active as an athlete, I can see some of these skills that he's learning, leadership skills. You talk about like peer-to-peer, going and playing football or going to play basketball, like the skills that you learn from doing something hard and being a leader amongst your peers, like that's a hard thing to accomplish. And that's a hard thing for a parent to teach a kid. So I don't have a perfect answer. I'm not saying that you choose one or the other, but I do think that a lot of those things can work together. So I'm an advocate of sports, the lessons that you learn through that. And I'm not saying that sports should trump, Wednesday night FHE, or not FHE, but
youth activity.
But I think it's okay to have an element of a healthy balance,
Yeah, I think it's worth just exploring, and like you said, no perfect answers. But it seems like it's becoming heavier and heavier on families, just the competition of it all. So, you mentioned routines. Take us back, like give us a crash course on routines. And I want all the nuances, and whether you write them down or whatever, like, because in leadership or any role where you have a focus or a vision, like it comes at you, that if you don't determine what you're going to do, like your life and world will dictate what you're going to just take you, right? So if someone wants to build stronger routines, I mean, what are components that come to mind?
Yeah. Well, I think, I need to give credit to Drew, in this. I will say that I became a really routine oriented person as a missionary. I realized the power of a routine, as a missionary. And then when I got to college, the reality was I wasn't going to be able to, do well in school and play football and find somebody to date if I didn't have a routine that allowed me to use my time efficiently and effectively. So ultimately, that's what I was trying to accomplish. But I really learned the power, again, as a young player in the NFL. And I've never been around somebody that was more routine oriented than Drew. And I just like hit the jackpot having the opportunity to be mentored by him. And I was just, this annoying rookie that Drew Brees,
right?
That I like,
the legend quarterback.
I just followed him around, right? And I made that comment about my wife would know if you told her, hey, what's Taysom doing on a Tuesday afternoon or Tuesday at 9:00, she would be able to tell you exactly what I was doing. I say that, but if Drew is still playing today, I could tell you exactly what he would be doing. I could tell you exactly what film he would be watching, what his exercises he would be doing, to a T. I could tell you exactly what he would be doing. And I guess I really learned a powerful lesson having observed him And I guess for me, it shocked me. When I was a rookie, I got to New Orleans, and in my mind, I was like, okay, Drew's been playing for 16 seasons now at this point. Like, he's won a Super Bowl. He's like, he was set NFL records in 2011 for total offense. Like, his accolades go on and on and on, right? Mm-hmm. So I got there and I was kind of like, well, there's not a defense that Drew hasn't seen, right? There's like, he's played these teams hundreds of times. Like, he could probably just show up on Sunday and just play. And obviously I knew that he would study and prep and stuff, but it blew me away how hard he worked off the field, how hard he worked on the field, right? As a 16-year vet, was still outworking everyone and outworking anyone I had ever been around. So he was the first one in, he was the last one out. He had his routine that got him ready for Sunday so dialed that when he got to Sunday, there was nothing that could fool him. He always knew, he was always prepared, and it was amazing to watch. So fast forward, I basically just did everything he did. I would show up early. I'd watch film with him. I'd go to meetings with him. I'd go early to practice, warm up with him. I would do his exercises. I was like, this little puppy following him around. And he was gracious enough to, allow me to do that. And just give me all this wisdom that he had learned.
And it's not like he sat you down like, here's my routine.
Never.
But you're just like, okay, this guy is like very intentional about everything he does, right?
Yeah. Everything.
Yeah.
And we became really, really close as a result of that, And then so I guess a powerful lesson was, so fast forward, now I'm trying to remember the year. I think it was 2020 when I first got my NFL start as a quarterback. Mm-hmm. And this is like childhood dream happening.
Yeah.
Like everything that you had dreamed about from a little kid, like to now, like I'm getting ready to start in the NFL at the quarterback position. We were playing a divisional opponent. We were a really good team that year. It was an important game for us. And I had this template. I had this routine of everything to do. So I did every single one of those things that entire week. And for sure I had some stress. I had some, anxiety as I was going into that game as my first NFL start, but I was blown away how little, butterflies and stuff that I had going into that game, because I realized when I got there on Sunday, I was so prepared for that game. I had never been more prepared for a football game in my life at the quarterback position, because I did everything that he did, right? And I had this routine. And then the game went really well and we won. I played well, and it's like this super memorable experience and this powerful lesson to me that man, you put the time in and the power of a routine, and then you can go play a game without having to deal with the stress, right? Because you were prepared for the game. And I think the same thing applies. I think I'm 33, like I'm a young person, right, in terms of the church and stuff, but I think sometimes we can kind of forget the power of a routine, right? Or I've spoken in church this many times, like, I'll just stand up and do this. And I think Drew taught me a really powerful life lesson early in my career.
Yeah. And I'm curious because obviously, especially during the season, I mean, those routines are crucial, and the routines kind of get you out of your head, right? That you don't have time to be nervous for the start because I'm doing this thing next, and that's just what I do, and plug that in, and out will come a good result, ideally. Is there anything like involving your family in that, like getting everybody on board, saying like, this is my job, these are the routines? Is there, I hate the question about, balance in life, because, Elder Bednar's talked about that a lot. That's not really a thing. It's just, but in a high demand calling or role or career, like, is it just about building those important things into that routine, or what comes to mind with that family dynamic?
I mean, I would say our family is a very routine, like my wife and my kids have a very, structured bedtime. They have their routine that gets them ready for bed. And we feel like that allows them to sleep well, get the most sleep as possible. And then the next morning, like, they're really happy, right? And they kind of have routines that they know we do at different times of the day. And I think that's important for both Emily and I and for our kids. I think as far as like the season goes and balance, it's just not realistic for me to have a balanced life from August to January, and I've realized that there are just times and seasons where your life is out of balance, and for what I do during the season, my life is out of balance. I work way more than I do the rest of the year, right? And I don't see my family as much as I would like to. I'm in a hotel every weekend. If it's an away game, I travel every weekend, but as part of our routine, like, we have time that's allocated to just our family, Monday afternoon, Monday evenings, like, don't call me, my phone is away, like, I'm with my kids, and my wife and I will have a date night. Tuesday we have similar things where I get allocated time with my kids in the afternoon, and then I try to come home a little bit early on Wednesdays and Thursdays so I can be with the kids, have dinner, we put them down, and then I finish what I would study, for those evenings. And so we have built-in routines where we try to have moments together as a family. And then on the other side of that, I realized that, during right now, like, my life is out of balance the other way, right? I'm home a lot more, I'm with my kids a lot, and we get this like really special time to be together as a family. So routines is really in everything that we do.
Yeah. I think that I really appreciate that I think it's so many times we have this false sense of like, oh, there needs to be this balance, and I need to, tell the coach or tell whoever I got to leave practice early because the family's really important for me. And they'll look at you like, I've got like 10 other guys like waiting for your job type thing. And I think it's okay, especially I'm thinking, put it in a church context. Someone's called as bishop, like, to sit down as a family and say, we're going to a different season of life. Like, Dad's not going to be around on certain nights, or Sunday's going to feel a little different. And that's okay because it's a season of life, right? And that's the beauty of professional sports is you have an off season where it's like, we're going to go all in on off season as a family and really be there. But during these months, it's really tough. Or, unless you're Tom Brady, you may not play too far into your 40s, right? So that season will give other opportunities for more balance. And so I think so many leaders are, high level individuals, they kind of feel that shame and guilt around like, I'm not balanced, but it's like, hey, it's okay. Like, this is a season and there's more good that will come from this than bad. Right.
For sure.
So,
and I think there's something to be said about being intentional with your time. I think I've already realized this, like if I get home from football and I haven't seen my kids for, all day, like, I'm gone before they wake up. But if I can give them an hour and a half of just one-on-one time, and I'm like deliberate with that time, like, that's enough for them, that kind of fills my boy's cup with time with Dad, and I think if you're intentional that way, and to your point, like, if you sit down and you talk together as a family and like, hey, this is what it is, and you do that, I think a lot of good can come from it.
Yeah, that's really helpful. So here's sort of more a light question: is like, what's it like being a church member in the NFL? Like, I'm always his name, the Kansas City coach,
Andy Reid.
Read his name, but I'm always like shocked. He's been to the Super Bowl last few years. There's always, he posts a picture of him at church on Super Bowl Sunday type of thing, and I'm like, man, like, I'd just be pacing, but obviously that's why he has the job and I don't. But like, what's it like being a church member during the season and in the off season, or what's that like?
Yeah, it definitely creates some unique challenges. There's several Sundays where like I can't attend church.
You're working.
There are some Sundays, and I've had some unique experiences where we'll play at 3 o'clock in Chicago and we don't have meetings that morning. And so I'll jump in an Uber and I'll go, I can catch like a 45-minute window of sacrament meeting. And I remember doing that, and I ran into a kid that I served in the mission field with,
cool.
who's going to church at that building at the time. And so I've had some like really unique, fun experiences that way. But it is hard. I miss being with the saints. I miss being able to go to church and worship with, your neighbors and your community and stuff. And so any opportunity that I have, I do that. And going into year 8, I would say that I still don't have like everything figured out, but my wife and I have been intentional about how do we make sure that we are still having spiritual experiences? How do we make sure that we are like allocating time to the Lord, right? Because I am working on Sunday, but my off day is Tuesday. So, through the years, we sat down and we're like, okay, so if it's not Sunday, right? I play on Sunday, even if it's a home game, I'm, home by like 4 o'clock, but I'm beat, so it's hard
literally.
to sit down and feel like you have enough time, energy to like allocate to something like that you would normally would. And so we will set aside time either on a Monday or Tuesday where we can sit down and have our own spiritual lesson, if you will, so we have done different things like that in the past to where we make sure that we are allocating time to the Lord and that he recognizes that we're doing our best given the circumstances. And then, off season is obviously really wonderful because I get to go and worship with my neighbors every Sunday. And that's a great experience. And we try to help where and when we can. I think I've realized that it's hard to have a normal calling in the church. Yeah. Given, we're half the year in Utah, we're half the year in New Orleans. And when we're in New Orleans, we're, not really there. And so because of that, I feel like we have tried to do our best to, whether it's firesides or accepting opportunities to go speak to youth groups or, sitting down and doing a podcast. I feel like we've tried to be intentional to give back in different ways, knowing that, it's hard for us to hold a normal calling. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that, do you kind of feel like, the bishop just knows you're sort of unavailable, right? Or have they made attempts to give you callings during the season?
Yeah. When I first got down to New Orleans, I served in the Young Men's Presidency, and then later I was a Ward Mission Leader. And I think during, off season, I was spending more time during OTAs early in my career in New Orleans, and then that kind of shifted once we had kids, and we spent more time here. And so now I would say in Utah, we got so many wonderful leaders, that we have worked with in New Orleans and Utah. But, I sat down with our bishop here and he was like, listen, I know the deal, but like, will you just be with our youth? So cool. I kind of bounce around, with the priests, teachers, deacons. Like Sunday, you'll see me in different quorums and just trying to have, different, experiences with each of them.
Yeah. So take us to that youth experience. I mean, what have you learned in that dynamic of sitting in a priest quorum or whatever it is, as far as connecting with youth? I know there's a lot of youth leaders that are like, I want to connect, but I don't know how it is. Yeah. I mean, you could pull out some highlights and be like, check this out.
Yeah, no. I think it's a great question. I think that's a hard thing. I think the thing with kids is kids can tell when you're genuine, like obviously kids are having much different experiences now than you were having when you were a kid. And that's okay. I think kids, the thing that I've realized, and I would also say the thing that I've realized in the NFL, right, that our team is made up of so many individuals, right, that have had so many different experiences, grew up in different states, different backgrounds. But the thing that always rings true is when somebody is just who they are, they're genuine in what they're trying to do and accomplish, like that is always received well, and I think that when you try to relate to the youth in different ways, I think that's an important lesson, because that that will always be received well.
Yeah.
You know, be who you are. And one of my mission presidents, you know, one of the greatest things about him was he led out of love, you know, and he was very intentional about that, like always expressing how much he cared for missionaries, you know, and that was just who he was. He and his wife were some of the most loving people that I've been around, and that was received very, very well because that's who they were. So I don't know. That's the first thing that comes to my mind.
That's cool. Take me to some leaders who've influenced you, both, you know, maybe in a mission context or church context, or even the locker rooms, the coaches you've had. What comes to mind as far as things that really stuck out to what helped you as a player?
Yeah. It's a great question. I mean, I have been around some wonderful, wonderful leaders, you know. I think one that really sticks out, and maybe this is kind of like, well, yeah, of course, kind of story. I don't know. I felt like this was meaningful to me as a young player in the NFL. So I don't know how familiar you are with my career. You know, I've obviously went to the NFL as a quarterback, and then ended up doing all these other things.
Started at Green Bay, right?
Yeah, started in Green Bay. But my rookie year in New Orleans, we were like, I don't know, we were more than halfway through the season. And I went to work one morning thinking everything was going to be the same. And it was a Wednesday morning. Our special teams coach grabbed me and he pulls me to the side, and he's like, "Hey, I'm going to have you like do some stuff on special teams for me today." I was like, "What?" I was like, "Okay, you know, whatever."
Because before that, you were just with the quarterbacks?
Yeah, I'd never done anything like this. And that's like, I had never played another position like ever, you know? So certainly like going to do something like this in the NFL felt really foreign, you know? So that day we went to practice and I did a few things for him, like special teams wise. And then I go back in the next day and I was starting on 2 special teams units all of a sudden. And then he was like, "Hey, I'm also going to try you on this." And I was like, "Okay." So I did that on Thursday and I go on Friday, and then I'm starting on kickoff return, and punt return for the game on Sunday.
Oh, really?
And I was like, holy cow, you know, like I've never played special teams in my life, you know? And we go to the game and it ended up going really well. And then fast forward later that year, really in 2018, my second year, Sean,
the head coach,
starts like, "Hey, I'm going to start doing this. I'm going to throw you in. We're going to add some different packages, and hey, I'm going to put you a tight end. I'm going to have you do some of these things." And I had never done any of that. You know, it was so foreign to me.
Was this like in the midst of this, are you like frustrated? Like, are they,
No,
they don't want me as quarterback or what?
Not frustrated. And they made it very clear that like, hey, this doesn't change anything, but hey, Drew's like our quarterback.
He's Drew Brees.
And like, he's Drew, right? So like, we think that you can add value to our team and help us win football games. And this is where this is coming from, you know? So I guess the reason I bring that up is because I think an important part of leadership that I've realized through my experience in the NFL that and maybe it's just me, I feel like that this hasn't been talked about a lot, is Sean and this other guy, Mike Westhoff was his name, had so much faith in me as a football player that they would, first of all, they were very vocal about that. You know, they downplayed how unique this was to me in every setting. You know, Sean and Mike were both like, "You're going to be fine. Like, you're just going to go do this. You'll be fine," you know? And it was really, really empowering, you know?
Just that belief they had in you.
The belief they had in me, and they were verbal about that. But the biggest thing is it then led to opportunities, right? They created opportunities for me. And then I was like, okay, they've told me they believe in me, you know, but now they're showing me, like they are giving me more and more and more opportunities. And that has been a really, really powerful lesson for me in terms of leadership. They empowered me without those guys, I would not be where I'm at today. You know, those guys instilled so much, I don't know, in just power in me. Like it gave me so much self-belief that like I could go do these really unique things that I'd never done. Right. And maybe if I was in college or something, it would be one thing, but I was like, I've only played quarterback my whole life. And now I'm doing this in the NFL for the first time ever, you know, against the best players in the world. But like, they believe in me, you know? And so I don't know. That was a really powerful lesson. I think about it a lot. I'm forever grateful for those guys. And some of the best leaders I've ever been around, you know? And so I think about me as a father, you know, how can I do that to my kids? You know, and not only tell them like, hey, you're a wonderful little boy. I try to always tell my 4-year-old, like, you are such a nice little boy. I love how kind you are. I love that, you know, you give me hugs and that you serve your mom. And then I will try to give him opportunities, you know, to do this, little things like that. But that was a really, really impactful and powerful lesson for me.
Yeah, what stands out there, so many times I hear leaders or parents, wherever, they sort of overcompensate on expectations. Like, hey, you better, you know, there's an expectation. Like if they came to me like, hey, if you drop too many of these punts, like that's going to be a problem, right? But instead they came at you through an invitation or through your identity. Like, Taysom, we know who you are. Like, we're not even worried about you shifting over here or, you know, doing this or that. You can do this. Like, it's that sort of, they pursued you through your identity. And to me, that's such a core gospel principle, because every ordinance we do in the church is all about identity, right? When we are baptized, we take his name on us, right? We go to the temple, we receive a new identity. And so it's such an effective leadership principle, is pursuing people through that identity of believing in who they are, right?
Yeah. But I think that, you know, such a powerful thing about that is like, it's one thing to go say that to somebody, right? It's another thing. Like, and I look at my experience on the biggest stage, you know, in 2018, when I was doing most of, like, the first time I was doing all of this, like we were the best team in the NFC. Like, we had the number one seed in the NFC, and Sean Payton is like taking Drew off the field and giving me opportunities and stuff, you know? So I think of that as like, you know, how can we empower? To me, that's what leadership is. How can you empower the people that you lead? How can you create opportunities for them to find success, right? And I look at some of the best coaches that I've been around, and it's the guys that can find ways to get the most out of their players, you know? But so much of that is believing in them, but you also have to create opportunities for them to do it, right? And, you know, in the church, we talk about delegating all the time, but I think that's an important principle, right? For letting people that you lead have experiences where they get to accomplish something that's like gratifying to them, you know? And then all of a sudden, like, they're a different person and they have different experiences, and like, oh yeah, I can do this, you know? Yeah,
that's powerful. Take me to, you were a captain at BYU. What is that leadership dynamic? Like, is there, I mean, I know there's like a moment where you're like, you're officially a captain type of thing, but then like, how did you step into that role? I mean, what did you see yourself as in the locker room, or when someone's having a bad game, or, I mean, walk us through that experience.
Yeah. It's a great question. Look, that was a hard thing, because you care a lot about it, right? Like that meant a lot to me to be a captain, have the opportunity to represent our team. But, you know, you take it one step further. You know, one of the things that always drew me to BYU was having the opportunity to represent something far larger than yourself, right? And to be able to represent the church and be an ambassador for the church, like, meant a lot to me. So then to be a captain and have the opportunity to do that was, you know, it was a little daunting at times. So I think for me, I think my biggest thing that I always try to do, I always tried to make sure that I work the hardest. I always tried to make sure that like I was never asking something of players or teammates that I wasn't willing to do. And I think that there's an important component of availability. When I talk about availability, I'm talking about where are you watching film? Where are you like eating your lunch? Where are you doing different things? Like, are you being available to your teammates to get to know you? And so when you step on the field, like they know who you are, they trust you, they've seen the work that you put in. And the other thing I'll tell you, kind of my go-to as a quarterback, football is an imperfect game. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to drop balls. We're going to throw interceptions. Like, that's just going to happen, And I think as a competitor, it's really easy to beat yourself up, right? Like, oh, I made a mistake. I fumbled. I did this. And, what was most important to me was we learn from what happened, right? And we move on. And I had so many conversations with my teammates around this idea. And I'd always tell them like, hey, we're good, right? Like, and here's the thing. I know that you're going to get the next one, but what we can't have happen is allow this to affect what happens the next series or the next play, right? Because we're all counting on you, and if we let a bad play affect the next one, well, then we have problems.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's kind of a loaded question, and there's a lot of ways that you could go. I think that is, one of the few things that I try to focus on.
Yeah, that's helpful. And then how about now, like in the Saints locker room, like you're an established player on the team and you've earned a lot of respect there. Like, how do you show up there? Or how do you impact the culture of the locker room, or when a game's going sideways or things like that? Anything coming to mind?
Yeah, I think it's all the same. I think when things are tough, people need to look over and see that that like we're gonna get through this. And I learned a powerful lesson. I remember I'm trying to remember exactly who pointed it out. Maybe it was Sean. Sean had made a comment to me in passing. He said, I want you to pay attention to Drew during the game. He goes, because when you look at Drew, you won't know if we're up 40, you won't know if we're down 40, or if we're getting ready to go have a 2-minute drive to win the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And so I always paid attention, and he was right. I never saw Drew's demeanor change. He was always locked into the game. He always knew what was going on. And I think that that's an important part of leadership, right? When things are going well, I think it's important to have fun, right? But I think it's important that you are like a steady, consistent figure, whether in the locker room, in your ward, right? In a family that just had a really difficult thing happen. And when things are going poorly, I think the same thing, right? You have to stay consistent, right? And I think people will follow you that way, and they look to that and they get power from it, knowing that like, hey, we just had something really bad happen, but we're going to get through it because I know that guy's leading us.
Yeah.
And we're going to be just fine.
Yeah. Yeah. There's some of that component of just being a measured leader, of like, we don't get too happy. We don't get too sad.
Sure.
We experience emotion, sure. But when people look to you, it's like, there's some stability there that draws people to say like, I'll follow that guy anywhere. Yeah.
And I can think of so many experiences throughout my career playing with Drew, and I've referenced him a lot, but he's one of the best leaders I've ever been around.
Wow.
And I can think of huge moments, and the dude was it was crazy.
Wow, that's awesome. Talk to me about just being a Latter-day Saint in the NFL. I mean, there's a handful of funny or unique
Yeah.
Steve Young stories that he's told, but is there anything to it? I mean, does it come up a lot, or it's just like, let's go win the next one?
Yeah, I mean, it does come up. I don't feel like there's ever been like a really hostile, situations. I've had so many wonderful conversations with teammates,
Mm-hmm.
that are curious, like, bro, why would you go serve for 2 years, and they're so curious about that, and so you have an opportunity to talk about that experience and the impact that it's had on you and your family, and that has been, some wonderful conversations. I've been in a few situations where I've had to defend the faith, and that luckily didn't get too hostile.
Mm-hmm.
That ended up being fine, but I think that as a Latter-day Saint and the way social media is and everything out there, like, I think that that's going to happen more and more often. And I love the way the church has started to handle these things. I feel like, hey, we're going to put all the information out there for you, like, and here's how you handle these situations. And but I have been in a few situations where some teammates have come and asked, some questions and allowed me to defend the faith. And then I've had silly experiences, like, as you're getting dressed in the locker room, there's a lot of curiosity
Yeah.
around the clothes that you wear. But I will say, everyone has been very, very respectful.
That's cool.
Very respectful of my faith, um, and in a lot of cases have been very open to understanding what I believe.
Cool.
And wanting to learn more.
Yeah. Well, I think, you've been a great ambassador just for the faith, and just to see somebody out there, and, it's, especially as you watch BYU games, it's almost like comical. Like the color guy always has the, he served a 2-year, whatever you hear that so many times.
That's talked about a lot.
Yeah.
Trust me. I got teammates that are like, bro, we played you guys and we were playing grown men. You guys were so strong. And I was like, okay, stop it. Stop it. Because you could go and do the same thing. Like, if you wanted to be 2 years older, and that could be your whole recruiting philosophy. If it was an advantage, everybody would do it. Okay. So like, stop it.
So true. Anything else before we wrap up? Like, you think of people you see as mentors, like Drew Brees or others, like any other lessons that stand out in your career as far as being mentored by these individuals?
Yeah. I don't know. I think that there's so much. I think, I love a phrase, and I forget who said it. But it was, at all times share the gospel and sometimes use words. I think as a leader, everyone is watching what you're doing, right? When you're in these situations, and there's a lot of really observant eyes, and mostly, young people. I think of that as a dad. Like, I've entering this phase as a 4-year-old, where my 4-year-old is doing everything that I'm doing. Like, I go to check the garden, he's out there with me, and he's, getting his hands dirty. And so, I think that that's important thing to understand, to know and realize. And, the best ones that I have been around from a church leadership standpoint, whether in the NFL or, whatever, it's people that understood that, and they were the same person. They were just a consistent, example, and, what it's like to be Christ-like.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. Well, last question I have for you is, as you reflect on your time as a leader, even in football, how has being a leader helped you become a better follower of Jesus Christ?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely changes your perspective, right? I think as you've been a leader, I think you now understand what other people have gone through, right? I think you understand maybe the Savior a little bit better as he was serving his earthly ministry and all the things that he did. So I think gaining that perspective helps you maybe be a little less judgmental, and accept, certainly in the church, accept that, this person has been called of God, and as a result, he's, you know, it's his role and responsibility to make decisions, and he's entitled to that revelation and to support that, right? When you've been in those situations and you want people to support the things that you're pushing. So I think it's all about perspective, and if you can take a step back and have the perspective of the leaders, then I think it's going to make you a better follower.